This is the Lumix DMC-FS15, a consumer-oriented point-and-shoot from 2009. I've owned this camera since receiving it as a gift that very year. Back then, I had no intentions of becoming a photographer. This was simply my everyday camera. I used it the same way we all use our phone cameras now, and ultimately, it was my first smartphone that relegated this camera to a box of random stuff in my closet. There it sat for a decade, forgotten. When I rediscovered it during a recent move, I quickly realized that letting this camera sit unused was a real shame because, well, let me show you. This camera was designed to be easy and intuitive to use. It has plenty of the usual scene modes, and no direct control over aperture or shutter speed. It does, however, allow you to select the ISO manually, and also has a couple stops of exposure compensation, which, as we'll see later, is critical to getting a good image. The lens zooms from a full frame equivalent of 29mm to 145mm, a typical range for the time. The maximum aperture ranges from f3.3 to f5.9. The sensor is a 12-megapixel CCD, and the camera allows you to crop the native 4:3 aspect ratio to either 3:2 or 16:9, at the expense of a few megapixels, of course. On the top panel is this button for Intelligent Auto Mode. This makes the camera a truly point-and-shoot device, completely automating exposure, white balance, focus, scene mode, etc. But for the best results, we need to take a little bit more control. The way I normally set up the camera is to first select Normal Picture from the Mode menu. Then I go to the Full menu and set my color mode and white balance. I pretty much only use two of the available color modes, black and white and vivid. This camera has a great black and white profile. And being that it only shoots JPEGs, the images are truly and permanently monochrome. No deciding later that you're going to revert back to color. I love that feeling of committing to a look. The vivid mode is capable of looking a lot like slide film, although the colors require a little work in post. As for white balance, I mostly use daylight. I'll use auto occasionally if I'm shooting indoors, but I rarely use this camera indoors. Moving back to the home screen, the last thing we need to do is set the exposure compensation. This part is crucial. Not only does this camera not handle highlights well, but the colors shift in strange ways when the sensor receives too much light, even when the exposure looks correct. Blue skies especially transform into this bizarre electric cyan. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Luckily, the blues look great when we control the exposure. How much compensation I use varies, but I generally start with -2/3 of a stop and go from there. And that's pretty much it. We're ready to point and shoot. I thought I'd finish up by showing you how I go about editing photos from this camera. Let's start with this Trump truck. Since we use so much exposure compensation, the first thing we need to do is just raise the overall brightness a bit. Yeah, maybe something like that. Alright, next, we need to work on the colors. The first thing that's catching my eye is this red, which is much pinker than I remember it being. I want to shift it a little bit more toward the orange, and give it more of a vermilion look. Maybe something like that. That looks better. Now it's too bright. We take the luminance down. Yeah, that's better. And maybe take the saturation down just a little bit. I think the blues could use just a little bit more saturation. And I'll shift the greens a bit toward the emerald. Lower the brightness on the greens a bit. Something like that. Looking really good. And the next thing you'll notice is, since this was taken at golden hour, my whites are really quite yellow. I want to keep some of that golden hour look, but it's just a little bit too much at the moment. So what I'm going to do is come up to my curves layer and select my blue channel and just shift those highlights a little bit toward the blue. Something like this. And before and after, that looks better. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. I think I'll boost my highlights up a bit. And my whites. Alright, if you notice in the cloud here, since we underexposed this so much, there's quite a bit of color noise. So I'm just going to scroll down here and reduce some of that color noise. Take some of that unnatural splotchiness out of the clouds. That's better. This is looking pretty good already. Now, if we zoom in, you'll see that the photo has sort of an unnaturally smooth look, partly due to the camera's built-in noise reduction, and partly due to the noise reduction we just added. I'm going to try to cover up some of that smoothness with some grain. I'll start by adding all of it. Don't worry, I won't keep it like that. And I'll adjust the size until I see the fine details start to blur out a bit. You're at about here, and once I've got the right size, I'll take the grain back. Just enough that it blurs out some of that smoothness. And before and after, that looks a little better. Yeah, maybe a little bit less grain. That looks good. And maybe I think this could use just a little bit more contrast. Maybe something like this. Yeah. Before and after. Maybe a little bit more saturation in the blue. Now, I don't know what you think, but to me this looks a lot like slide film. And finally, I thought I'd show you how I edit one of these black and white photos. I'll just start by duplicating this and resetting the edit so you can see what it looked like out of camera. I mean, come on. Have you ever seen anything quite like this? It's so unique and unusual. I think I'll start by just straightening this up a bit. Maybe something like this. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And I think I'll take the blacks down, make the blacks a little deeper. Maybe add a little bit of vignette. And a little bit of haze. Maybe a little bit more vignette. Yeah, that looks nice. And I think I'll add some contrast. Maybe make these highlights a little bit less harsh. Looking good. I think I want to make those darks just a little bit darker and more brooding, a bit more dramatic, moody. And bring the exposure up a tiny bit. Black's a little deeper. Yeah, something like this. So that's the FS15. Since being rescued from the forgotten box of stuff last year, it's become my most used camera. It's small enough to fit in my shirt pocket, easy to use, has a versatile range of focal lengths, and, provided you get a good exposure, is capable of producing beautiful images. It's the perfect point and shoot for my daily mental health photo walk. On top of all that, it holds sentimental value to me. After all these years, the same humble device continues to have purpose in my life, although that purpose has evolved. What once was a utilitarian tool for casual documentation has become an instrument of creativity. Back in 2009, I would never have guessed either how far into the future or in what ways I would continue to use this camera. That fascinates me, and it makes me wonder how I will continue to evolve in the future. Who will I be another 16 years from now? What new activities or interests will occupy my thoughts and my time? I can only guess.